All right, so the cocktail of the month for August is here, and you might be wondering because you've received a collection of different things. And I'm gonna go through what those are, and then we're gonna go ahead and make some of those cocktails. So to begin for the contents of the kit today, it is gonna be the signature gin balanced, and it's gonna work in all of these cocktails quite nicely. Next up is the 1642 ginger beer. If you've never had this before, one of my favorites, and it's a lot of fun to play around with, so use it in moderation, because it's certainly got a lot of that ginger kick to it. As well then, a little bit of lime cocktail mix. You need a bit of citrus in almost every cocktail you make. Next up is going to be some rose syrup, and this rose syrup is going to bring a bit of complexity to some of the cocktails that we are making. And then after that, we've got a watermelon. So we're going to do some cutting of this watermelon, we're going to do some freezing of this watermelon, then we're going to make some cocktails with this as well. So I'm just going to put that right over here. It's watermelon season. Next up is some watermelon juice, fresh juice from the watermelon. Always keep this in the fridge and shake it before you make your cocktails with it. Fresh lime, of course, helpful once again. And then we've got fresh mint, and we've also got some fresh basil as well. And finally, it's not on your ingredients list, but a little bit of coarse salt that will be used in the cocktail. So now that we've had the opportunity to kind of go through the contents of the kit, let's go ahead and make one of these cocktails. We are going to be starting with the watermelon smash. So some things that we're not going to need from this, we can put the ginger beer over to the side. One of the most important things is to understand the glassware that you are going to be using, and kind of all the ingredients that you're going to be using. Whenever you're making a cocktail, it's best to make sure you have everything before you get going. But before we do that, we need to make sure we know what we're doing with this watermelon. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna dive into cutting a watermelon, one of my favorite things to do. And I learned this helpful trick from one of our bartenders here at Reed's. His name is Zach, and he taught me how to cut a watermelon. I never knew this, but I watched him do it, and now he does it in complete full. He doesn't even cut it in half first. I'm not quite that skilled. So first, I'm gonna cut the watermelon in half. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to skin that watermelon. Why am I going to skin it? Well, we're making cubes from this watermelon. I've put half over there because we are going to use a thin slice for garnish. But really what I'm going to be doing is just going around and cutting off the outside, right? Because we're using this here in cocktail making. We're not at a picnic having some watermelon on the picnic. We are making drinks with this. We are going to be freezing some of this, so make sure you can cube up your watermelon and throw it in the freezer, okay? Because at the end of the day, a watermelon ice cube might be one of the most refreshing things that you can add to a drink. Of course, gin is right up there with it. So I've got the edges done. I'm going to cut off that top, and now I'm ready to, of course, cube this up. I'm just going to do some relatively large chunks, nothing too big though, because at the end of the day I want to be able to utilize what I'm cutting up here. And final cut, and we are going to be using some of these fresh watermelon cubes right away in this cocktail. Some of them we are going to be keeping in the freezer for a bit of a slushy style cocktail. I don't want to call it that, more of a frozen style. All right, perfect. So we have now got all our cubing done. I must say I'm pretty impressed with myself. I'm going to put this over to the side, and we are going to be using this throughout the rest of the cocktail making. But for that first cocktail, the watermelon smash, we are using Reed's signature gin. Like I said, it's well balanced and it's easy to enjoy. So we're going to be using that. So first, let me move this out of the way. We don't need this right now, right here. We will need this a little bit later on. Perfect. And so when it comes to how we're going to go about making this, you should have some helpful informational sheets in there for you. They're easy to follow along, and it's actually quite fun. We wanted to make them with you, so if there was any questions, you can always kind of dive into that as well. When it comes to how much you're going to be using in terms of gin, 50 mils. Now, my rule of thumb is always start with the lowest cost ingredient first, because at the end of the day, there's nothing worse than making a cocktail wrong and you've got all the premium spirits in your shaker to begin with. So We're going to be starting off with the basil. Basil being one of the lowest cost ingredients. I've got 2 basil leaves right here. I'm going to break those up and slap them. Okay, I'm going to slap that and I'm going to throw that right into my shaker. Perfect. And now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be also grabbing some watermelon. I just freshly cubed this. I've got some already in the freezer, so I'm going to be using that in another cocktail. But if you haven't yet, put your other cubes in a freezer. You're going to be using it for another one. So I've got my watermelon cubed and in the shaker as well. 20 mils of fresh lime juice. This one already has a little bit of the simple syrup in it, so it's going to be doing the trick. There we go. Fresh lime juice is in there. What we now need is a little bit of a pinch of salt. Not too much, just a touch, just like that. Salt's going to bring the complexity out in the watermelon. That's one thing that with watermelon is it's watermelon. It can sometimes be a softer tone, so you want to open that up and really bring that apart. So now what I'm going to be doing is adding in that 50 mils of Reed's Signature Gin. I've already got a bottle open here, so I'm going to use that, 50 mils. There we go, and right in there. You'll notice I haven't put the ice in yet, and that is purposeful because, well, if I'm taking time making a cocktail, I don't want that to over dilute. What I need to now do is add in some ice. Because this cocktail is what we like to call a dirty ice pour, I'm going to take the whole contents of this shaker and pouring it in my glass. I want to make sure however much ice I'm putting in here is the amount of ice I want at the end of my cocktail. Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Alright, awesome. And in terms of glassware for this one, it is a rocks glass that we are going to be using, all right? And we are going to be shaking this cocktail until 2 things. 1, the shaker becomes unbearably cold, and number 2, all of that watermelon is broken up and ready to be enjoyed. So shaking that, make sure you get a nice seal on your shaker, whichever shaker you're using, and go ahead and shake that away. I'll be honest with you. Whenever it comes to a dirty ice pour cocktail, I really enjoy over shaking it a little bit. If I was making a more balanced cocktail, I might not shake it quite so much. But I know I've got all the good ingredients in here. There we go. I can feel this nice unbearably cold. I'm almost done. All I need to do now, pour that right into my shaker, just like that. You're gonna notice the cascading effect, one of my favorite things. While that happens, I'm gonna grab a single basil leaf, just like this. I'm gonna place it on the edge because I wanna be fancy. I'm gonna grab that other half of the watermelon that I have, and I'm gonna cut a very thin, beautiful, delicate slice. At the end of the day, it doesn't need to be too fancy. It's up to you. Garnish is a great way to expand your cocktails. So for me, that is pretty much my go-to there. You can also do without the watermelon. That is a personal choice, but that is going to be your watermelon smash. All right, so that's your watermelon smash there. Let's move right along into the next cocktail. And the next one we're gonna be making is the Melon and Rose Cosmo. This one is fun, it's a little bit more spirit forward. We like to make sure that you guys have representation in most of the flavor categories. What you're gonna need for this one is, of course, that Reed's Signature Gin. You're also gonna be needing that watermelon juice. Remember, shake that up. You're gonna be using that in this cocktail. And the lime cocktail mix, where did I put that? Right here. So some lime cocktail mix as well we're gonna be using this in, as well as a little bit of rose syrup and some mint. So we've got a lot of bold flavors happening here, and it's gonna open up that watermelon. Once again, this style cocktail is pretty simply build in your shaker. Okay, we are gonna be double straining though. Previous one here, we did a dirty ice pour. This one, all in the shaker, and we're gonna be doing a double strain. So make sure you have your double strainer. So I've got my Hawthorne strainer here, and you will need a fine mesh strainer as well. So once again, 60 mils of gin, because this is a spirit forward cocktail. So I've got my gin right here, 60 mils right up to the top. If you don't have a measure, I'd recommend. It is one of the most useful tools when it comes to making your cocktails. Now look at that. I put the most expensive ingredient in first, that's okay. I'm pretty confident in my ability to make this cocktail, but as a rule of thumb, always try and go with the lowest cost ingredient first. Next up is some watermelon juice. So refreshing on its own, but This one is designed to be in the cocktail, so it's almost in equal parts. 60 mils of gin, 50 mils of watermelon juice, right there, perfect. Pouring that right in. And then next up is your lime cocktail mix. Same thing, right? It's gonna be fresh lime juice. Fresh juices are essential when it comes to cocktail making. It really does make the difference. And we're doing 20 mils on this one here, so the smaller side. Get to know your measure, get to know the lines and what they all mean. 10 mils of the rose syrup. You're gonna have lots of this to utilize. You can even use 20 mils if you want. It's completely up to you, but everybody's a little bit different. So I'm going about 15 mils. All of these cocktails you can kind of play around with and play around with the flavor profiles. And then finally, the mint leaves. I'm gonna break those up and slap them. I kept one beautiful mint leaf because I wanna use that as garnish. I throw that in there. Final stage, I'm gonna need some ice. Perfect. You can't really make cocktails without ice. It's such an essential component. So all my ingredients are now in my shaker, and before I dive into this, using a coupe glass. I've got a fancy style on here. You'll find a range of different style coupe glasses. So this is the one that I'm gonna be using here. And now I am going to shake and double strain. So aggressive shake, but not as aggressive as I did here on the watermelon smash. You wanna go a little bit lighter on your shake. Perfect. So I can notice it's cold. That's nice, but I don't need to pulverize everything that's in here too much. Nice and cold to the touch. And now a double strain, so my Hawthorne strainer, and as well my fine mesh strainer, just straining that right in there. What a beautiful looking cocktail. Nice, right there. That is almost done. We're of course missing a little bit of garnish, and that is going to come from the lime. So I'm gonna be cutting this lime here, just a little bit of a fresh wheel. I'm gonna do 2, because for me, I love the aroma from limes. Limes really go above and beyond. So I've got my 2 freshly sliced limes here, just right onto the edge. I'm gonna try and make it balanced. Sometimes it doesn't, but this right here is your Melon Rose Cosmo, okay? A little bit more spirit forward, but still along the same vein of that watermelon style cocktail. All right, the next cocktail. This might be a first in all of the cocktail of the months. We're doing a frozen style cocktail. So you are gonna need a blender or a food processor, or if you don't have those, well, you can just break up some ice. It'll be comparable. And we're gonna need all of that, and we're gonna have a couple other ingredients. So before I put that stuff into my blender, I'm gonna be putting that into my shaker just so I can add all my ingredients in and then pour those together. So once again, it's gonna be your lime juice, your ginger beer, watermelon cubes, okay? And you're gonna put that all in with your gin, and you're gonna blend that up. So you should have some frozen watermelon cubes. You're gonna wanna take those frozen watermelon cubes and put them into your blender. So I've got here about 4 or 5 watermelon cubes. I'm just gonna throw that in here and get ready to blend them. And beyond that as well, you wanna make sure you grab your other ingredients. So your lime juice, here it is again, and I'm gonna be putting in 30 mils. So that's the tall of my short side. So the full of my short side here, putting in 30 mils, there we go. So right now I've got watermelon cubes that are frozen, and I've got my lemon or lime juice in there. What you're gonna wanna do now is also put in some gin and some ginger beer. Like I said, we are using 1642 ginger beer. It is intense, so if you think you don't love ginger beer, use a little bit less, but if you're looking for a little bit of a balance in the kick, I would say go for it, use a little bit more. I'm gonna be pouring in the full 100 mils that is put on the recipe there. There we go, beautiful. And like I said, I'm doing this all in the shaker before I put it in the blender, just so I have a same spot where I'm putting everything. I find it's just easier. It's part of my, my pattern of what I'm putting together. And then finally, the last and final stage is, of course, your gin. We've got 60 mils of gin. I can almost taste the ginger beer from here. It's so intense. 1642 out of Montreal does a fantastic job in creating mixers. All right, they've got a yuzu, they've got an elderflower they just released. They've got a lot of fun, different ingredients. Okay, So now I have everything in here, but I am missing some key ingredients. And of course, that is a blender and that is some ice. So I've got a blender off to the side here. I'm gonna pour all of this in. All right, nice, including all of those frozen watermelon cubes. I'm gonna be putting those in as well. And now some ice cubes. How many ice cubes? That's up to you. How much of a smoothie do you want? How much of a freezy do you want? It's completely something that you're gonna wanna figure out yourself. Perfect. But I will say, I put almost a full one of these in here. I might even be making this into 2 cocktails, but we'll see how it finishes out. I'm sure I could find somebody around here who will want to enjoy one of the cocktails. So, as you can see, we've got all the ingredients in there. We are just missing to pulsate that, so I'm gonna go for that now. There we go. Nice. You can see there. All right, you don't wanna go too liquidy. You wanna keep that nice and consistent. A little bit more. Perfect. All right, wonderful. And now what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be taking this and you're gonna be putting that into a Moscow Mule glass. So I've got this here and pouring that right into a Moscow Mule. Wonderful. There we go. It's a bit of a slushy consistency. If you want more consistency, put a little bit more ice in there, but it's missing that final stage, which is of course your garnish. So I've got some fresh mint that I'm gonna be garnishing that with, and I'm just gonna take that mint and just put it right into that cocktail. And that there is your frozen watermelon mule. And those are the 3 cocktails that you'll be using for this month's Cocktail of the Month. We have the frozen watermelon mule, the melon and rose Cosmo, and as well, you've got your watermelon smash. So enjoy and feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions. Cheers.